Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of GeoPod. I'm your host Dylan Woods, and today I'd like to discuss the Ukrainian incursion within Kursk Oblast. So, the talk of the day, or rather the talk of the past couple of days/week, has been the daring Ukrainian infiltration of Russian territory, let's say, which has allowed them to penetrate behind enemy lines into the territory of their adversary, and actually, as of right now, hold pieces of territory, pieces of land there, given the fact that Russia seems unable or unwilling to properly address the threat. So what I would like to discuss in this video is some of the tactics that I believe, or strategies that I believe Ukraine has in mind for this incursion, as well as some of the options they have at their disposal to do next, if you will. So first and foremost, I believe the reason why they initiated the incursion is to distract the attention of Russian forces. So as of right now, what we all know is that Ukraine finds itself at a deficit. There's a lack of resources, there's a lack of munition, there's a lack of advanced weaponry, and they're feeling the stress, right? Russians are advancing, albeit steadily and slowly. They are advancing all across the eastern lines. And Ukraine, as of right now, is forced to play a defensive game, meaning it's more or less waiting for any form of Western support that will give it the ability to hold back the Russian advances. So what I believe the Ukrainians said to themselves is, wait a minute, this is a losing battle we're waging here. We don't have the luxury of just defending. We had a great run ever since 2022. We didn't win this war by being meek, or we didn't, let's say, do as well as we have up until this point by playing on the defensive. We need to do something, and we need to do something quick to distract the Russians and open up a second front, let's say, as to spread their resources and spread their manpower. And they did just that. It's a daring incursion, one that caught many people by surprise, but it stands as a testament to the courage of the Ukrainians and the resourcefulness and creativity of their troops, because now Russia finds itself in quite a predicament. It had expected, more or less, to be able to steadily advance more and more in the absence of Western support to Ukraine, thereby capturing more ground, relatively unopposed, let's say. But now they're faced with a daring incursion into their territory. So not only does this provide some strategic problems to them, but it also provides PR problems to them, given the fact that the image they have upheld to their own people is one of continuous victory, that there is no cause for any trouble or concern, that Russian borders are and will be safe, and that there is no threat facing the Russian population as of right now. However, when we have an incursion of the enemy, well, that contradicts that entire narrative, doesn't it? So now Russia finds itself in the predicament of, what are we going to do? Are we going to abandon the attention on our eastern lines? Are we going to deplete our manpower there, deplete our resources there, or rather redirect them towards Kursk as to halt this incursion? But then, the downside to that is that first of all, we need to acknowledge that an actual incursion is taking place, thereby shattering the entire narrative that we have upheld to our own people. So that's a very delicate matter. It doesn't take much for a political narrative to shatter, especially when people are already suspicious of it to begin with. So this is a very delicate predicament for the Russians, even though the incursion, as of right now, doesn't span much further than, I believe, 24 kilometers. So the Russians find themselves in quite a predicament. And what I believe they will do is trying to mute as much information, news and developments regarding this incursion as possible, while they're trying to figure out ways to properly address it. As of right now, what they've done mostly is send ill-equipped units, mostly consisted out of draftees, to those new front lines with the aim to suppress the Ukrainian brigades. Well, that hasn't worked. they've been defeated relatively rapidly. And now the Ukrainians are finding themselves in a position where they can actually gain more grounds in the absence of an immediate Russian response. So now the Russians, if they have to respond and if they wish to mitigate this problem, are going to have to send more of their professional troops, proper resources, proper brigades backed up by proper artillery units, tanks and armored brigades. So that means drawing resources and units away from where they were actually supposed to be as of right now, and thereby stalling any advancements, and thereby allowing more time for the West to get support to Ukraine. Now, the Ukrainians might have initiated this incursion with the mindset of, okay, we're just going to distract them and stall them as much as possible, open up a new front, trying to distract them to the best of our abilities, cloud the battlefield, let's say. But as of right now, as they're continuously finding success, they might look to the future and might think, hey, well, what else can we gain here in the short, near, mid and long term? Well, that's a very interesting question. First, we might say, well, we can see how far we can push it and penetrate as deep within Russian territory as we possibly can get before we encounter significant resistance, let's say. Or we might do it a little bit more strategically. We might dig ourselves in. However, the downside to that is it takes resources, manpower and equipment, what they're already short of at the moment. But it is an option, thereby continuously undermining the narrative of the Russian government and dealing a psychological blow to the Kremlin. Another thing that they might opt for is halt the immediate incursion, stop from gaining more territory, reinforce their positions to the best of their abilities, see what kind of resistance comes their way in the near future, and then go from there. And if such resistance remains absent, then if you were the Ukrainians, you might say, hey, wait a minute, we can use this to gradually move closer to the Russian lines on the east of Ukraine, see if we can push forward further, perhaps in the long term encircle them and harass them from multiple angles, thereby making it harder for the Russians to hold their lines within eastern Ukraine, as well as make advances forward. So there's a lot of options, if you're the Ukrainians, that are worth looking into as of right now. If I were them, first and foremost, what I would look for is just do as much damage as possible in the near term. Don't necessarily look to occupy ground for the extended period of time. Just see what military infrastructure you can reach, how many waves of resistance, let's say, you can withstand, and initiate as much or execute as much damage as possible in the duration of that. Then, if all of that proves successful, well, then we are in a position where we can say, wait a minute, what if we are actually reinforcing our positions here? Especially if, at that time, Western support arrives. And if so, how can we use that to change the situation along our eastern lines? Maybe making life much harder for the Russian troops dug in there, and maybe being able to attack them from multiple angles as we suppress their continuous advances into our territory. So all of these are very interesting options to look at. Now, we know that Western support is coming, right? We know that F-6 Ukrainian pilots are currently being trained in how to use the F-16, which will be another huge game changer on the battlefield. So as of right now, it's really interesting to see how far the Ukrainians can push this incursion in the long term. Because 25 kilometers might not look as much, but if the Ukrainians remain disciplined, hold their lines and the integrity of their brigades, it can prove a very hard job for the Russians to push them back entirely, all the way back over the border. So I'm very curious to see how the Ukrainians are going to develop, how they're going to progress with this initiation. And obviously, if any developments do occur, I'm sure to treat them on this channel and to discuss them a little bit more in depth with you all. So these are my current thoughts on the subject. Again, it's all quite new. We still have to wait and see how far they're going to take this and what the developments will be in the coming days and in the coming weeks. But as of right now, these are my thoughts on the subject. These are some of the options that I think are worth looking into if you're the Ukrainians. And these are some of the problems that I've addressed that I believe will prove to be most severe for the Russians as of right now. I thank you very much for listening to this clip. Please feel free to leave a like underneath this video, and please feel free to subscribe to my channel. I'm looking forward to disseminating more content on here in the near future. Once again, I thank you very much for your time. God bless.